So I have Visual Studio Code open here, and I'm going to show you what we're building first. You can see at the top, we're importing a variety of libraries that we need for this project. We're going to be using WebSockets, so we're going to need the WebSocket client. We're using JSON data. We're going to need the NumPy library, TALib. We have a local config file, and we're going to pretty print some data just so that we can analyze the data that's coming in from Binance. And we're also going to be using the Python Binance package, so we're going to need to install all of those packages first. At the top here, I have a number of constants written out where we define some values that we're going to be using in our program, and this allows us to easily configure how our program's running. So since I'm using the RSI indicator as a simple example of an indicator we can use to make trades, I'm defining some RSI values here. So we're using like the defaults of RSI period 14, an overbought threshold of 70, and an oversold threshold of 30. And I'll talk more about what the RSI is in a moment, but those are the default numbers that are used. And if we wanted to change those defaults, then we could just change them right here. The symbol we're going to be trading is Ethereum, so I have the symbol coded in here. If we wanted to trade Bitcoin, we could just change the symbol to Bitcoin, BTC USD. We're going to buy just a small amount since we're just demonstrating this for educational purpose. So I'm buying 0.05 Ethereum, and since Ethereum is over $400 US now, that's actually spending about $20. So we're going to buy about $25 worth of Ethereum and buy and sell it based on an RSI indicator. We're going to be getting our data from a WebSocket, and so if you look up Binance WebSockets in their official documentation, they have a candlestick stream here, and it has a specific URL format, and this is the data format. And we're going to be using a WebSocket stream here, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But we're going to be streaming Ethereum USDT data, and we're going to be getting 1 minute candlesticks. And the reason I'm showing really short time frame candlesticks is because people are really interested in short-term data on this channel. I've been doing a lot of daily examples or weekly and monthly examples, but a lot of viewers out there have been very interested in very short-term trading, so they want to see a lot of action happen real quick. Also, it's easier to make a video and show it actually executing when we don't have to record this across multiple days. So I'll actually be able to show you data in real time and show you candlesticks that are closing and new data points being added to our series for analysis by TALib. All right. We're going to be tracking all of the closing prices of each candlestick. So we initialize an array or a list, and we're tracking whether or not we're already in the position. We're going to be initializing a Binance client so that we can execute buy and sell orders against Binance. And I'm going to go into all this in detail in a moment. I'm just skimming over this to show you where we're going, and then I'm going to show you how to get there. Okay, we're going to define a function to order. And so let's start at the beginning of the program. We're actually going to connect to a WebSocket. So we're going to create a WebSocket app. We're going to give it a socket to listen on. So that'll be our WebSocket stream. And then we're going to specify a number of callback functions whenever we listen on the stream. So we're going to be listening for data to come in, and we're going to call different functions whenever we get a new message and when we open a connection. So we're going to run the WebSocket. And then each time we receive a message, we're going to be receiving some price data. And then when we receive that price data, we're going to be processing that price data in the form of candlesticks. We're going to look at the close of the candlesticks and apply a technical indicator to those closes in real time. And whenever our RSI is above the overbought threshold, we're going to execute an order. And then when our RSI is below the oversold threshold, we're going to execute a sell. So you kind of see where we're going with this. So I'm going to show you how to do this step by step. So first I'm going to draw a diagram, and then we're going to install some of the dependencies. So let's get started with actually building this thing out. So as usual, I have a new Visual Studio Code editor open. I have a new folder. I called it RSI bot. There's nothing in it yet. I'm going to create a new file called requirements.txt. And this is where I usually keep track of the different Python dependencies we have and the various third-party libraries that we rely on. And so we're going to need a few libraries in order to build this project. The first thing we rely on is Python Binance. So if you look this up, Binance, there is a wrapper around the Binance API. It provides some easy-to-use methods for placing orders and creating a Binance client. So you just need to install Python-Binance. The next thing we need is TALib, which is the technical analysis library. So if you look up Python TALib, you'll see a reference to that. And all we need to do is do a pip install of that. And so if you go to the documentation here, it has some installation instructions. And I've done this in other videos as well. So you do pip install TALib. Some users of Windows have reported they have different instructions they need to use. So make sure you review that. A lot of people are installing it separately using a wheel file, since Windows is a little bit different in this regard. On OS X, I had to type brew install TALib first, I believe, and then install it with pip. Okay, so we need Python Binance, we need TALib, we need NumPy, which is used for calculations on NumPy arrays. So it provides a way to perform really efficient, optimal calculations on series of numbers. All right, and then we also, what else do we need? I think that's it. Oh, we also need the WebSocket client for Python. And so if you look up Python WebSocket client, you'll get this page here, and you see the package is called WebSocket client. And so we need to install that as well. I already have these packages installed, so if you don't have them installed, you need to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to create a new file called pythonbot.py, and I have my Visual Studio Code editor configured to activate a virtual environment. And so if I run this, you'll see it'll run this automatically, and I'm already have this virtual environment activated. And so I just need to do pip install-r requirements text, and it will install all of the packages that are listed in this requirements.txt. And so we should have everything good to go now. And so now what do we need to do? So we're going to import WebSocket, which is part of this WebSocket client package. And then we're going to go ahead and create a new WebSocket client. So we're going to do ws equals WebSocket.WebSocket app. And then we need to give it a socket to read on. So we need some type of stream that we're going to read. And so we need to look at our Binance documentation, right, and see the names of the different streams we use. And so if you look here at K-line candlestick streams, they provide some streams, and then we get all this price data. And so you see we get a timestamp here. And then we also get this open, high, low, and close data that they provide. So we just need to find the URL format that they use. So if we look for WSS:// you see we have this base endpoint of stream.binance.com. So this is where all of the data streams from. And so let's create a variable for that. We're going to call this socket. And so we'll put that in quotes, and that'll be the base there. And then we also need the address for the stream. So we need a /ws. So we'll need a /ws. And then we need to give it a stream name. And so if we look at our candlestick streams, we should see, oh yeah, so we just need symbol and then at K-line and then an interval. So I'm going to put that in there as well. And so we need a symbol. So the symbol we're interested in is Ethereum USDT, which provides prices for Ethereum. And then we want candlesticks or K-lines, and then we need to provide some interval here. And so which stream are we interested in? So they provide streaming data across multiple time frames. And so Binance will give us a 1 minute candlestick stream, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or a daily stream, or whatever time frame we're interested in. And since we're trying to retrieve data more frequently and want more candlesticks so that we can show this in a video, we're going to do a short time frame. So we're going to use the 1 minute candlesticks. So instead of interval here, I'm going to put 1M. And so that'll give us our socket. And so our WebSocket app needs to listen on a socket, and then it'll connect, right? And so what this WebSocket app requires us to do is to give it some callback functions. So it'll connect to this socket, and then it wants us to define a variety of functions here. And since I have the Visual Studio Code Python extension installed, I get some auto-completion here so I can see what's available. And so what we need is a function for when we open the connection. We need it to call a function. We need to provide it a close. So when the connection is closed, we need to give it a function to execute to show it what to do. And then we also need an on message. And this is the most important one, right? And so we give it those parameters. And so we can define these functions here on open. And then like that. And then we can print opened connection. And so we can say on open equals, and then we pass it the name of this function, right? On open equals on open. On close equals on close. So I'll define the logic I want to execute when the WebSocket is closed. So print close connection, right? And then on message, right? And then we can print received message, right? And so we pass it these callback functions. So after we connect, we receive all these different events when we're connected to the WebSocket, and then we tell Python what functions to execute when these events happen. And so let's see if we can run this. Okay, and we need one more thing. We need ws.run. It's called run forever. If we run that, we initialize the app, we give it the callback functions, and we say run the WebSocket app. And let's see if this actually runs. I'm going to hit my play button here and run the bot. And it says error on close takes positional arguments, but one was given. All right, so let's look at our WebSocket documentation here and see what it needs. And so it actually needs a reference to the WebSocket, so that'll be called WS, right? And so each of these functions need to receive an input of WS, and the on message one receives an actual message. And so we need some input parameters. So these get a reference to the WebSocket, and then this one gets a reference to the WebSocket and a copy of the message, right? So I added those input parameters, and now I'm going to run it again. So I ran it, and it just said close connection. It didn't say open, so there must be something wrong with our connection. So let's see what happened. So if I look up here, you'll notice I accidentally left this angle bracket in. Oops. Now I'll run it again. And now it says opened connection. And now it says received message, received message. So we're receiving messages successfully, but we don't know what messages we're receiving. And that's what this reference is for this variable message. So every time this on message event fires, we receive the message itself. And so instead of just printing receive message, let's print the actual message. And so I'm going to stop that and run it again. You'll see it opens the connection. And there, look at that, just like that, we're receiving messages, and those messages have open, high, low, and close data on the candlestick. So if you look at the documentation here, you'll see that we get this JSON data format, and then the attribute key, or the attribute K here, actually has the candlestick data that we're interested in, and so we can parse that data out and start using it. And so let's see if we can parse this out. So we're receiving this data in JSON format, and so all we need to do is parse those messages. And so to do that, we need to import JSON, because we're getting JSON data. Instead of just message, we're going to do JSON message equals JSON.loads. And so what that will do is take a JSON string, and it will convert it to a Python data structure that we can use. And so I'm going to do JSON message equals JSON.loads. And I can then print the JSON message, right? And it's not that easy to read this here. And so I'm going to use the Python pretty printing functionality. So I'm going to also import pprint. And so if I do pprint.pprint JSON message like that, this will give me a little easier format to use. And so let's think about what data we're interested in here, right? So we're getting our price data for Ethereum, and we see the opening price was $429.46, so $429.46, right? And so we're getting this candlestick data in real time, right? And you'll also see what it does is the timestamp. So this T here is a timestamp. And so if I type that into unixtimestamp.com, for instance, you'll see what time it is where I am. So it actually gives it this UTC time, and so you'll see this is for August 16th at 1 in the morning UTC time, and I'm like 7 hours before that. All right, so we have these timestamps coming in, and then we know the prices that correspond to that timestamp. So that's good. But we don't really want like all of the data. So this is just streaming data as it comes in, more and more prices, right? But we're only interested in the open, high, low, and close, like the final value for that candlestick. And so what I've noticed is that, see that X equals true there? That'll tell you when it's the final value of the candlestick, right? So if you look at this documentation, you'll see X false. Is this K line closed? And so this tells us if it's the last tick that we received. So this is the very end of the candlestick, right? And so you'll see these timestamps are going to stay the same between data points, right? So you'll see that's 8,000 at the end. You'll see that one is 8,000 at the end. So we're getting more and more data, but it's for the same candlestick. And it's only when that X becomes true that we got like a new candlestick has started, right? So I'm going to stop that real quick and let's think about this. So since we're going to be using the RSI indicator, all we really care about is the close of each candlestick. So I just need to capture the closing value, right? So since we know that when X is true, it's the close of the candlestick, we can say is candle closed, close equals, and then I also want a reference to just this part. So I'm going to do candle equals message K, right? And so I'll say is candle closed is candle X, and then the candle closing price, so the close is candle, and then C is the close. So we have an easy reference to whether the candle just closed and what that close was. So if is candle closed, print candle closed at dot format close, and then let's just print the closing price of each candlestick as it comes in. So if I run this again, you'll see that data starts to stream in, and it says string indices must be integers. Oh, and that's because I renamed it from a message to JSON message. So let me just call that JSON message. So candle is a reference to JSON message, and then if I run this again, let's see what happens. All right, and so we're streaming in data, and we're only going to capture the final closing price of the candle when it actually closes. Okay, right there, you can just see that X became true right there. That means it was the very last tick of that candlestick. So X is true, and so we printed our candle closed at, and so the closing price for that candle was $429.31. And then we continue to stream, data second by second until we get another close. And so we have a way to get the closing price. So now what we want to do is we're thinking in terms of the RSI indicator, which can process our data based on a series of closes. And so what we want to do is actually track a series of closes. So at the top here, I'm going to create a global variable. I'm just going to call it closes and start it as an empty list like that. And then here I can get a reference to that. So I can do global closes. And so if the candle is closed, let's go ahead and append closes.append the close, right? And then over here, I can just print closes. And then I can also print the actual closes themselves. So the string closes and then the closes, and then you'll see these start to build up over time. And so we'll eventually get a series of dozens and hundreds of closes, minutely closes, right? And then what we're going to do is convert those to a NumPy array and then have TALib apply an indicator to those closing values. So you can see I've just rerun the program again, and it built a list. So we just appended a closing candlestick price to our list of closes and printed out the list. And it looks like it printed it out as a string. So we're getting a string. So for NumPy to operate on that, we need to actually convert this to a number. And so instead of just appending the close there, let's go ahead and cast it to a float. And so we'll do float of close and just keep appending these numbers to our list. And eventually you'll see this list starts to build up. And so yeah, that's pretty much all we need for the WebSocket client part of this. We're successfully getting Ethereum pricing data from the WebSocket, similar to the diagram I showed. So the second part of that is we need to talk about the RSI indicator and TA-lib and how it applies to these closing prices. So I'm going to let this run and continue to build up candlesticks for a while. And then let's go back to our diagram and I'm going to show you how the RSI indicator works. And I know a lot of people already know that, but I want to break this down even further step by step and try to teach these principles from scratch. So in my previous tutorials on Binance, we already talked about the RSI a little bit. We showed it using TradingView and also wrote a back test to show us the results of trading with the RSI. Sometimes on some time frames it works out well, and other times it works out poorly and you lose money. And so for the examples we gave, we looked at Bitcoin over the daily time frame for the year 2020 here, and you see this is Bitcoin, and in March it tanked along with the market, right? And you can see the RSI goes below, if you look at the bottom here, under 30, so it's oversold there. You make a buy, we're probably getting Bitcoin below 5,000, so 4,000 something. We bought it when it's oversold. We got one oversold signal, perfect. And then we get this overbought signal and sell it at what, over 8,000, nearly 9,000 per Bitcoin. And so that's a great trade, right? You made over 50%. You got one oversold and one overbought. You make one trade, not many commissions to pay. Great, 50, 60% return. So that's awesome. That's what we want to happen. But we showed how that's not always the case. You can show your strategy here and it looks like it worked for one time period. But then often, as we demonstrated, we wrote this backtrader backtesting function here where we downloaded 15-minute candlestick data for Binance for the year. And you see here we showed where these entry points are not always great. So we talked about some of the flaws, right? So here Bitcoin went down and it flagged oversold actually right here, right here. And then you see it popped up real quick and then gapped down even lower here. And so you can see where it got even more oversold on this particular chart. And so you are underwater with your position. So one thing that can happen is something that's oversold can stay oversold, and an asset that is overbought can stay overbought, and you miss out on a lot of your returns, right? And so this is a particular case where we showed where you could sometimes be underwater by trading with this strategy. So the important point is, to backtest your strategy over multiple time frames, or at least have a backtest that applies to the time frame that you're using. And then the other lesson is that usually people don't use the RSI indicator by itself. Usually they use it in conjunction with other strategies like the MACD or other indicators. It's not often a good idea to use it by itself. And the reason we're using it by itself here is because this lesson isn't necessarily about finding the optimal strategy or combination of multiple indicators. The idea is simply showing the mechanics of subscribing to a WebSocket data feed, applying some technical indicators using TA-lib to that data feed, and then executing those buys and sell orders against our brokerage account using a simple set of rules. And so this provides us kind of a hello world example of a simple set of rules, similar to most hello world examples are like a moving average crossover strategy. And so this is an RSI strategy, and we're going to buy and sell based on whether the RSI is overbought or oversold, right? And so that's great. We're looking at this RSI oscillating on a chart, but we haven't really talked about like how do you even calculate the RSI? Where does that number even come from? And so I'm going to go even more in depth in this tutorial and draw a quick picture and do some hand calculations to show you how that's calculated. If you don't want to dive into that much detail, feel free to skip along, but I'm trying out some different teaching techniques in this particular video, and so I'm going to work on some diagrams here and illustrate how this number is actually calculated. Okay, I'm back in Visual Studio Code, and we've been watching all of the price data stream in from the Binance WebSockets. And when it's the closing tick of a candle, we've been capturing the final open, high, low, and close data for that candlestick, and we've been appending the final close here into a list called closes. And so you can see we accumulated a number of closes. So now what we want to do is apply TA-lib's RSI indicator to this series of closes and get an RSI value. So in order to do that, we need to go ahead and first import TALib. So at the top here, we've already imported a WebSocket, JSON, and pprint. And so we're going to import TALib and NumPy because we're going to need those for our calculations. All right. And then also we're going to set up a constant for our RSI. That way we can tweak it. So I'm going to say RSI period equals 14. And these are just the default settings that people normally use, but we can adjust these if we want it to be more overbought or more oversold, or we want to do a different period. So I'm going to do RSI overbought equals 70 and RSI oversold equals 30. And those are going to be our various thresholds that we're going to use to determine whether to execute or a buy or sell order. Okay. I'm going to create another constant here called trade symbol, and we're going to be trading Ethereum here. And so this is the symbol from Binance that we figured out from one of our previous videos. And then we're going to determine a quantity that we're going to buy. So I'm logged into my Binance account so I could check the prices. If you don't have a Binance account for trading, I'm going to leave a referral link. If you want to support the channel and want to sign up using that link, feel free to do so. So in my Binance account, I say buy crypto, and I'm just going to see how much Ethereum happens to be. So let me see what $20 worth is. Well, I'll go to the symbol for Ethereum, right? And let's say I want to buy $20 worth. Looks like that's about 0.046. So I'm going to just say 0.05 Ethereum is the amount I want to buy. So I'm going to do trade quantity as a value, and I'm just going to store this. And these are just going to be our settings for our bot, and then we can tweak them if we want to adjust our bot's behavior. So we have those constants in, and we're listening on the WebSocket already. And so the next thing we're going to do is keep track of the number of closes. So we've been appending the closes, as they close, we're appending it to this list. And to calculate the RSI, we're going to calculate the RSI 14. And so to calculate the RSI for over 14 periods, right, as we calculated on paper, the first just one or two closes isn't enough. So we need at least 15 closes in order to even start calculating an RSI that we can use. And so we're going to say, first of all, if the length of closes, so let's make sure we have 15 closes first, is greater than RSI period, right? So if we have 15 closes, which is greater than RSI period 14, then we can actually start using a TALib, right? So we have a list of closing prices that we've been accumulating, and we've converted them to floats in the latest version of the code. And for TALib to operate on this, it expects a NumPy array. So we're going to take this list and convert it to a NumPy array. And so I'm going to say NP closes equals NumPy, and you can just do NumPy.array and just give it a regular Python list, and that'll convert it to a NumPy array of closes. And then to calculate the RSI, we can do RSI equals TALib.capital RSI. And so if you didn't watch previous videos, if you search Python TALib, pull this up, you'll see there's a number of indicators available. And if you look at momentum indicators here and look at RSI, you have this RSI and you just need a close. And then the time period by default is 14, but you can override that. So we're going to just use the default period, and I'm going to pass it an array of closes. So we're going to call the RSI function, which is part of the TALib package, and we're going to pass it np closes, which is our NumPy array of closes, and we're going to give it the default period, or we can just pass it, RSI period here, and if we change the period to 10, for instance, a 10 would go here, which is good. So then we'll start calculating RSI values. So what this is going to do is calculate a series of RSI values. So once we get 15 closes, we'll get one RSI value, but on the 16th close, we'll get the second RSI value and so forth. So this RSI is going to actually be multiple values, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So let's go ahead and just print out the RSIs that it's calculating, right? And so I'll print all RSIs calculated so far. and this will be a series of RSIs. And then what we also want to do is get the last RSI calculated, right? So the last RSI calculated is going to be the one we use in order to make our trading decision. And so we want to get the last RSI and set it equal to the last value of this series. And so we can use a negative index to start from the end. So RSI -1 there is going to be our last RSI value, and we'll print that as well. So we'll just say print the current RSI is and dot format, and this is just for debugging purposes, and I'll say last RSI. And then what we want to do is say if the last RSI is greater than our RSI oversold or overbought, right? If the RSI is greater than our overbought, then we can print sell, 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 right? And then we can also say if last RSI is less than RSI oversold, then we print buy, right? And so we have a condition under which to buy and sell. So there's one problem with this so far is if we were to buy when Ethereum is oversold, right? If it's less than RSI oversold, what happens what if the RSI is 29 and then the next minute it's 28.5 and the next minute it's 28, right? It's still oversold each time around. So we would keep buying over and over again. But that's not really what we want to do for this particular strategy. Maybe there's another strategy where you'd want to do this, but we want to just buy one time a fixed amount when it's oversold the first time. And then if we're already in the position, we don't want to keep buying more and more. And likewise, if it's already overbought, we're going to just sell what we have. We're not going to sell it in pieces or anything. So what we want to do is check if we're already in the position. That way we don't need to keep buying over and over again because we don't have unlimited money we're working with. We're just looking to risk about 20 bucks here, right? And so what we want to do is check if we're in position first. So up at top here, we're going to keep track of the state. So at the beginning of our program, when we first started, we're going to say in position is false, right? We don't own it. And then over here, if the RSI is oversold, we'll first check if we're in the position, right? And if we're already in the position, we can just say it is oversold, but you already own it, nothing to do, right? So there's nothing to do here. Otherwise, if we're not in the position, then we want to buy, right? So we're going to leave a comment here, and we're going to say put Binance order logic here, right? And on the other side of the coin here, when it's overbought, if we're in position, then we want to actually sell, right? So we'll plug in our logic for, so we'll say put Binance order sell logic here, and I'll put buy order logic there. Otherwise, if we're not in position, there's nothing to sell, and so we'll just say print we don't own any, nothing to do, right? So we'll say it is overbought, but we don't own any, right? All right, so we have some messaging in place, and so we have the mechanics of this working, and so now all we need to do is actually fill in the Binance ordering code. And so I'm going to run this real quick and let it run for a second, just to make sure we don't have any errors, which we do have an error, so let me fix that. So I forgot an equal sign, and we'll let that run for a while, and make sure we're still receiving messages. We're still receiving messages, which is good, and this should keep running. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to pull in some the code to actually buy and sell crypto using the Binance API. And as we said earlier, we're using the Python Binance package. So if we look up Python Binance API, you get this library here. And there's methods for ordering. And let's find those ordering endpoints. So under account, there's order endpoints and place an order, right? So it's client.createOrder. And now we're going to piggyback off our previous video. If you followed along, we built out this app.py here. And I'm going to pull it in just to show you what we did in previous videos. If you want to learn more, we actually built a web application where you could buy and sell crypto, and we built a front end for showing real-time charts. And just to show that off real quick, I'm going to do flask run, and I'll post the source code for this as well. And I think I already have it running actually. So I'm going to run it on localhost 5000. We called this coin view. And here we were actually plotting the real-time prices of Bitcoin. So we called the application CoinView. It let us buy and sell crypto from the web. It showed our current balances that we had in our Binance account, and we're able to tweak some settings. And so we could actually use this as the front end for this bot, and we could enter in our RSI settings here and publish that to the WebSocket for our client to read, and then we could tweak our settings from the web, similar to how you can do with TradingView. So this we're talking about how you would build that type of functionality yourself. So this is the front end we were working with. And what I wanted to show you here is the actual source code. So this is available in the repository. I'll post the link below. But we had in our app.py, we have a Binance client. And so we're going to copy what we did here since we've already written this code before. So we need the Binance client, and we need these enums, which are some constant values that we're going to use. So I'm going to copy these two lines here, and I'm going to put them in our program. So I'm going to import the Binance client, and I'm also going to copy this part where we instantiated a new client. And so we're just going to do this at the top here. We're going to create a new client. Okay. All right. So we have some constants. We have a client object. We're going to instantiate it, and we're going to put a config.py with our API keys. And so we need an API key and an API secret. So I'm going to do API key equals and API secret equals. And I'm going to fill this in with my API keys from the Binance site. So if I go back to Binance, you can look at your account, and there's this API management here where you can find your API keys and copy them to this config. And I'm going to put these in here and not show you mine. Now that I have my API keys inside of my config file, I just import config. And then I can do just like this, config.API key and config.API secret, and it'll use my API key and secret from this config file. And then I'm not going to commit that to the source code repository, but I'll put a sample config.py where you can fill in your own. Or I'll commit it with empty strings just so you know to fill it in there. And then you'll notice I have this TLD equals US there. And since I'm in the US and I'm using Binance US, it required this TLD parameter here, or it didn't work. I forgot the error it gives, but that's the reason that's there. So make adjustments to that as needed. So now that we have our client instantiated, we're just going to make a quick function for ordering. So we need to decide what that looks like. So let's go back to the app.py that we had for our other application where we actually create buy orders. So we had this buy endpoint that we can use from the web, and this same functionality can be used in a function from the command line. And we can abstract this out and build our own little library if we want to, but it's pretty abstract at this point because we're already using the Python Binance client. And so our code can be reused inside of our command line program. And so I'm going to make an order function here, and we're going to have that order function accept a couple of things. Looks like we need a symbol, right? And since we're not using a form anymore, we want that symbol to come from a function input. So we'll have a couple parameters. So to order something, we're going to need a symbol. We're going to need a quantity that we want to buy. And then we need a side, so whether it's a buy or a sell, and we need an order type, right? And so we're going to call this function from our WebSocket client, and we're going to give it the necessary parameters to buy or sell. So the symbol is going to be the symbol that comes in when we call the function. The quantity is not going to come from a form. It's going to come from our function call. So right now it's filled in with side buy and order type market. These are actually constants that come from this Binance enums library, and you see they already have a bunch of constants defined, and some of those are side buy, side sell, these intervals and so forth, so that way they can define these string values all in one place. And so we're just importing them and using them right here. And I want to be able to make this function work for both buying and selling, so I want the side to come in as a parameter. And so I'm going to use side that comes in from here, not the constant. And then I'm going to just leave the order type market. Actually, I'm just going to give it a default order type of market, and then you can override it if you want to. And so type equals order type. And then so the parameters from the WebSocket we're going to call, we're going to say quantity simple side. I'm going to change the order of these a little bit. I'm going to say side, so it'll be buy. And then I'm going to have the quantity and then the symbol. That seems more natural to me. So it'd be like buy 0.05 Ethereum. Okay? So that's our order function. So client.createOrder, and let me just verify this one last time. Right? So I'm going to put these on one line so it's easy for me to read. Okay. And so what we'll do here, and let's wrap this in a try catch block. That way if there's any exceptions from this, we'll say the order failed. So I'll do try, right? And then let's just return true. Let's print out what happened. So let's print out the order and then return true. So we'll say print sending. I'm going to print sending order. So we're going to print a lot of debugging information because we're going to run this for the first time soon. So I'm going to print sending order, order equals create order with these parameters. I'm going to print the order and return true. If for some reason an exception happens, let's return false here. Okay. Matter of fact, though, we can return true at the end here. So if no exception happens, if all this stuff happens, then we'll return true at the end. If an exception happens, we'll return false. Right? So that's our order function. Okay? And so now all we got to do, let's just get our function signature here. And let's just call this from within here, where we said to put our Binance sell logic and buy logic. So we're going to say order succeeded equals order, and then we're going to say side is side sell when it's overbought. Quantity is going to be the quantity that we defined at the top. So we said trade quantity, we called it. So we'll say trade quantity. And trade symbol, which we have defined at the top. And our order type is going to be market, so we'll leave that as the default. Take off this colon. All right, so that's order succeeded. So if we're in position and the RSI that was last is overbought, then we need to sell. So we're going to do an order, sell our quantity of a certain symbol, and that looks good. And then if the order succeeded, then we're no longer in the position. So we can set in position equals false so that we don't keep trying to sell it over and over again. And then otherwise, then it's overbought. We don't own any. Okay, that's good. And then let's look at our oversold condition. So if last RSI is below the oversold threshold, we can do and if we're not in position yet, let's put our Binance buy order logic here. So we'll say order succeeded equals order side buy trade quantity trade symbol. So we'll buy 0.05 Ethereum. And if the order succeeds, we'll say in position equals true because now we own Ethereum. All right. And I think that's all we need. If there's no syntax errors, we should be able to just run this program and have it buy and sell orders in our Binance account and have it run overnight and come back and see if we made or lost money and make adjustments from there. And we can just leave this running forever. So I'm going to stop the program. I'm going to run this just to make sure there's no syntax errors. It looks like it's running, so it looks like there's no fatal errors out of the gate. And so I'm going to let this run for a while and just see what happens and see if we can capture any buys and sells. And so I'll come back and edit the video out if this runs for hours and hours. It's possible it can run, for hours and not trigger an oversold condition. So it just depends what happens. I'm running this in real time. I have no idea what's going to happen. And so it looks like it's running, and then we had a close of 428.29, and it's 9:40 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday. And so we're receiving messages. I'm going to let this accumulate. We need to get 15 minutes of candlestick data first before we even get a single RSI. So I'm going to walk away and come back when this is further along. So I'm back, and I've let the program run for a little while. It's after 10 p.m. and I'm looking here, and you can see how this program has been running, and it gradually calculated and stored a bunch of closes in a list here, and we kept showing our closes as this list grew, and then eventually it grew to 15 closes. And luckily enough for us, it didn't take us a long time to get an oversold condition. It actually happened pretty quickly, just a coincidence of when we started our program. But you can see that once we had 15 candles, it started calculating an RSI value, and the very first RSI we got was 26.11, and it was actually an oversold condition. Alright, so if you were watching really closely earlier, I didn't notice this until after this caught the oversold condition, but the buy order actually didn't execute after the oversold condition hit, and there's a reason why. So if you look in our oversold code here, order succeeded equals order, and I had trade symbol twice when I needed trade quantity and then trade symbol. And that's just a result of letting the autocomplete work, and I hit tab too early, and so it filled it in with trade symbols. So needed to double check that there, and so I fixed that and ran it, but unfortunately I can't show you the buy execute in real time just then because it actually didn't happen. So we successfully detected the oversold condition but didn't execute the buy. So what we can do right now is show you what would have happened real quick. So I'm going to go into TradingView here now that a little bit of time has passed, and I'm going to show you the results. And so it's actually this period right after 10 p.m. here. TALib actually calculated this was an oversold condition right at this point, a little after 10 p.m. So we would have made the purchase here, and then the next overbought condition would have been after these powerful candlesticks up here, and so we would have bought it around here and sold it around here, and that would have been a profitable trade, which is good. However, that doesn't mean that much, right? Because I actually let this program run overnight. So this is the next morning that I'm recording this right now, and so I let this program run from midnight till 9 a.m. and just went to sleep and let this execute trades while I slept to see how good our trading bot would perform, right? And so now that it's the morning, I'm going to see what happened, right? And so I'm going to expect that I woke up, this made thousands of trades, and I woke up and made millions of dollars, right? Is that what we expect? I don't know. Let's see what happened. All right, so if I go into my order history in Binance, you can see what happened. And also to show you that I really ran this overnight, I can go to my editor, and you can see where we accumulated tons of prices in these closes, right? And you can also see our messages like overbought, but we don't own any, nothing to do, candle close. And so we have hundreds of data points here and hundreds of RSIs that are calculated, right? And so we need to see what actually happened, right? And so if we go back to Binance, let's see if we made our millions of dollars. I'm going to go to my order history starting after midnight and see what happened. And you'll see that just after midnight, we made a buy, and at 6 a.m., we made a sell. So we made a whopping one trade that entire period. And so we can go back and verify that everything worked correctly, but there was actually only one trade, and we actually lost money. So you can see Ethereum price was 426.68 here at 1241, and we bought it, so it must have been oversold. And then you can see it wasn't overbought till 6:11 a.m. in the morning, and then we sold it, right? And so we bought 0.05 Ethereum that cost us $21.34, and then we sold it for $21.13. So that lost 21 cents right there. And we also had a transaction fee, so 0.02, right? 2 cents on each side, so 21 cents plus 4 cents. So all that effort and waiting overnight, and we lost 25 cents, right? But that's not really unexpected, right? We already backtested these types of strategies, this short-term RSI, on its own in previous videos, and showed, this is not really a good strategy to use. So why did we use it? Well, we want to go through the pain of actually building something like this out and seeing how it operates. And so we did achieve the goal of building something end to end and studying our results. And part of the process is getting a bad result and then tweaking that until you find what works for you. So like the first time I ever traded a stock option, for instance, I just went on an app, I clicked buy a weed option or something like that, and I pretty much expected to lose the money, and just that feeling of losing money made me actually pay more attention. It made me learn really quickly. So then all of a sudden it motivated me to learn what I was doing. It motivated me to research all the terms and try different things, buy a short-term option, buy one that's in the money, buy one further out of the money, buy one that's longer dated, and just kind of observe the price action and learn from my mistakes. So what we've done is build a trading bot based on a simple indicator, and it made a trade overnight while we're sleeping. So we achieved the hands-free automation part, but we have not yet demonstrated a strategy where we made some money consistently. We made money on the first trade, but the overnight trade was a loss. And one final thing I'm going to do is verify that this was correct. Was there only really one buy and one sell? Let's look at what happened in the price and RSI overnight. So I'll pull up the chart and verify that our program was correct so that next time we run it, we know that it's working. So I'll go back to this chart. And if you look at overnight, starting on August 16th at midnight, you'll see where the oversold reading occurs. So this is the RSI bouncing up and down. This is midnight right here, and you can see indeed 41 minutes after the hour, right? You'll see that this price action downward, so you see all these red candles here going down. It had a lot of downward price momentum, and it got oversold, and that's when we made our purchase right there, a little above 426, right? And let's see what happened. Why did we lose money here, right? It's oversold, right? It bounces, but it doesn't get overbought and goes back. It's still oversold, but we're already in the position, so we didn't do anything. We didn't add. Goes back up, never gets overbought again, and then goes all the way back down and gets deeply oversold. We're still in the position, right? So we didn't do anything. And then if we keep going, you can see that it kind of downward trends and just keeps getting oversold periodically, and then just kind of bouncing up to the middle. And so it never gets an extreme overbought reading. And so this runs just all night and just bounces and oversold. And so you can see Ethereum last night, at least, kept selling off over and over again. So it would come back up, keep selling off and getting oversold again. So looks like overnight, if we look, I'm zooming out, right? And so we started with Ethereum at 428, and then it just gets oversold, and it looks like it just starts this big downtrend overnight. From about 3 a.m. till 6 a.m., it just keeps downtrending. And so there's never really a good entry point that would have worked using this indicator. And so if you would have coincidentally started your program here, then you would have got the entry point and felt like you were smart, right? And so you can see it never really gets overbought till right here after 6 a.m. And that's when our sell order triggered. So it's overbought, and then it got overbought over and over again. And then we just said, we're already overbought, there's nothing to do. So indeed, our program was correct. We left it on overnight. There was one oversold reading where we entered, and then one overbought reading much later when we exited the trade, and we actually exited as a loss because it kept downtrending and got more and more oversold. And so by the time it got overbought again, it was actually under the price that we originally bought it at. So that's the lesson there. I hope you learned something from studying what can go wrong with this particular indicator. And also, I hope you learned how to build a bot from scratch, because now that we have TA-lib installed and we're reading price data, you can plug in any indicators you want or any other algorithms that you want, or you can plug in your some proprietary data sets and all these things. And all you got to really do is swap out the strategy, because we already have the brokerage execution part, we already have the real-time data part, and we already have some libraries for performing a technical analysis. So you just need to decide what strategy you want to take.